Hello, welcome to the Social Justice Forum. I am Daren, Jaime. We thank you for joining us. Now, if you're asking the question, what's the show all about? Well, we bring you a forum discussing and providing a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities that so many people face, from systemic inequality to pressing social problems. Our guests provide multiple perspectives and insights, helping us understand and better address the challenges. We invite you to stay connected to us. The Social Justice Forum starts now. And we are back. Echoing Green, known for its dedication to nurturing social entrepreneurship, has named a visionary leader as a 2022 Global Fellow. 1,000 More's mission is to broaden civic empowerment for marginalized communities through an innovative app. And here now, we've got the founder and CEO of 1,000 More, Deshante Parks. And thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. So how's it feel?
Amazing. I built this tool, but it really means nothing. It does nothing if people don't use it. So anytime people are enthusiastic about sharing the work, it just means the world to me. And I'm super excited to get it into more people's hands.
So let's talk about the work for a minute. You have an app, right?
Yes.
And it really helps people in terms of awareness, connectivity, and politics.
Yeah, so what we do is we provide a tracker of all the bills that are coming up for a vote in Congress. And we write everything at a third grade level because 54% of American adults read below a sixth grade level. So believe it or not, there was no tool before this that made it really easy to see every bill that your federal elected officials were going to vote on in a way that is not only digestible to the average person. We always say you don't need a law degree to use 1,000 More, but also there's tools to take action. So we're nonpartisan. Whether you're for or against, you get the same options. You can call, email, or tweet your elected official. There's a little script in case you're nervous about what to say. And you can also donate to an organization that's advocating for or against the bill, because when we crowdfund our dollars, we're bigger than the big lobby.
When we talk about the audience, I think it's something not to gloss over. You said about 54% of people really are not even reading at sixth grade level, right?
Yeah.
So that means a lot of information to really make plain to people. As you get this information out, what is the response of people? Because we know some people are politically engaged, some people are not really politically engaged until we get to presidential elections.
Exactly. So people are always surprised at how easy it really is. And part of the reason why the literacy rate is so low is because in America, there's a lot of people who English is not their first language. So you can read 1,000 More in over 100 languages. And that's super important to say. But then in terms of what you said about people typically being engaged during presidential election seasons, that's true. And what we're trying to do is capture that energy and then make it easy for people to consistently stay engaged through legislative sessions. So you shouldn't only be checking in with your elected officials every 2 to 4 years. You should have a tool, a mechanism where you can see everything that they're working on throughout the year. You can let them know what you want them to do on each bill. And that way, when it's time to either re-elect them or choose the other candidate, you can hold them accountable.
Excuse me, you have marginalized communities who are out there, right? And that is one of the huge things they say, are accountability. There is no accountability sometimes in these communities. They're taken for granted, things of that nature. To have the opportunity to actually see what's coming across the plate, right? To know, and then also to actively engage. Talk to me about how much of a difference maker that is in the life of somebody who's in the marginalized community, to have access to information and then actually know what to do with it, right?
Yeah, so in 2 ways. In real time, I see people. One of the things that I like to do is spend my time on social media connecting with people who are saying, this bill is about to move, it's gonna impact me, I feel so helpless. And I'm like, you don't have to. Here's a link to read a little bit about the bill. Decide how you feel about it and contact your elected official, again, with that script in case you're nervous about what to say. And people just, their emotions change. You know, feeling hopeless is one of the most devastating ways we can feel as humans, to feel like we have no power over our own lives. And so to just help people find their power and really exercise their power, that in itself changes people's moods. You know, they feel better. But also, we see real change. When the Uvalde shooting happened, there were a lot of people on social media talking about, why don't we have legislation on guns, or why can't we pass legislation on gun reform? And we saw people take that energy off of social media and actually contact their elected officials. And for the first time in nearly 3 decades, Congress passed legislation on gun reform.
Right. Huge, huge there. Talk to me about technology, right? Because you've chosen technology as a platform. But if we're just really keeping it 100, we know that adults struggle in the area of technology, right? And so you knew putting this together, you're taking a gamble because we know sometimes adults are not really the most prone and technology savvy people.
Well, the funny thing is we are the adults now. I would assume you're a millennial. I'm a millennial, so we can't say adults anymore because we are the adults, and we got the internet when, I don't know, I was like maybe 10 or 11 when we got the internet in my house. But so that said, you know, really, I'm looking forward. So democracy has not been brought into the tech age like many other things. Essentially, what the Robinhood app did to Wall Street, the way that it made Wall Street accessible to regular people, that's what we're doing to politics and to the lobby. When regular people crowdfund our dollars, in America, we spend about $5 billion a year crowdfunding, and like the lobby spends about $3.5 billion a year. So we outspend them. And so when we crowdfund our dollars, we can really tip the scales. And in terms of, you know, people being able to use the technology, it's very user friendly. And I would say at this point, most people, even my mom, can use this. Now, my grandma, I showed it to her. She said, I don't know what I'm looking at.
Right.
But my mom is, well, she wouldn't want me to say her age.
Right.
But she can use it.
And so she's very comfortable. She's very comfortable using it and doing what she does. Talk to me about misinformation, because that's huge, right? There's a lot of misinformation that goes out there. How do you do a good job of disseminating what is and what is not? We hear a lot, we see a lot. Social media, you know the drill.
Yeah, exactly. So number one, people need access to information that they trust. 1000 More at its foundation is a journalistic tool. I have a degree in journalism. The people who work on my team who do the content she has a degree in journalism. And so essentially, just knowing that the information we get is vetted in a way that a independent, nonpartisan news source would vet the information. I mean, we're looking right at what the legislation itself actually says, and then we're just distilling that into a short summary and rewriting it at a 3rd grade level.
Yeah. For yourself, why did you decide to do this?
It actually came to me in a dream.
Really?
I never thought I would be in technology at all. I have a degree in journalism.
Right.
I wanted to do something similar to what you do, actually.
Okay.
This was my dream job. And then
About to be an unemployed job, okay?
And then I ended up working in public affairs, working on campaigns, working out in the community. I would always hear from people, why do we only hear from y'all when it's time to vote? And I'd be like, you don't have to. You can text me whenever you want to. I promise
Right.
I'll get you plugged into what we're doing. And I want to hear from you. And it's true. Many elected officials do want to hear from their constituents more. It's just hard because there's a lot of constituents.
Right.
And with local news dying out, it's sometimes very difficult to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in your constituency. So I was actually feeling quite hopeless in a point of time in my life after 2016. And I had a dream one night, and I woke up in the middle of the night. I had seen this app. Basically, there was a person in the dream that was like, we're about to stop this bill. And I was like, yeah, right. How are you going to stop it? And he was like, we all use this app. I'm like, what app? Show me. He showed me the app in the dream, and I woke up and promised God I would build it. I built it. I got into Echoing Green, and now I get to be here sharing the idea with you.
Right. My gosh, so that's an amazing story. So when you put your team together, talk to me about how did you get your team together?
Yeah, well, so the first thing is I don't have any tech background. So the first thing is I had a mentor that gave me really good advice. She said, tell everyone who will listen what your idea is, because most people are scared someone's going to take their idea, but most people can't even execute their own visions. And so I would tell everyone, and I finally told some random person, and he was like, oh, I used to do like product management for a tech product. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I didn't. So he helped me build a roadmap, and I used that roadmap. So I hired a graphic designer. We built out a clickable prototype together. Literally, I went on Instagram and said, does anyone know a graphic designer?
Wow.
Yeah, hired a graphic designer.
IG, you can get anything on IG, right.
Hired a graphic designer who lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I went to LSU for college. My family's from Shreveport, Louisiana. So yeah, hired her. She was the first person I worked with. Then I hired a software developer, and I said, can you make this clickable prototype a real app? And he did it. And then I hired someone to help me with the content so I could focus on other things. You know, as it grows, you have to continue to build. So, you know, now we have 2 software developers. We actually have been a web app up until this point because we wanted to plug into other apps. I didn't think people wanted to download a political app.
Right.
But we are going to be a mobile app soon. So
That's
stay
great.
tuned for that. Yeah, so now we have 2 software developers, one working on the mobile app, one on the web app. And we have our content person, social media help, that sort of thing.
Talk to me about the response by electeds when they see this.
So far their teams sound like they love it, but actually, you know, government is a 2-sided market essentially. It's really a 3-sided market because you have advocacy organizations as well. With elected officials and 1,000 more, they can see a separate interface where they can see what their constituency is telling them to do in real time. So when they go out into the field and they hear people say, why do we only hear from you when it's time to vote? They can say, well, I'm on 1,000 more. So I actually am seeing in real time. And actually, we're still waiting on our first elected official to get on. We just started selling that part of the app about a couple months ago. So, you know, if any of the Bronx reps are listening.
Yeah, listen, there's a whole lot of them out there that can actually, you know, get connected. When we talk about technology right now, you know the technology is huge, election outcomes, right? When we talk about the intersection of both, bridge that gap for me.
Yeah, I think the reason why 1,000 more is so powerful is because it's a central place where you can find everything. I think about it as like that busy mom who works all day, cooks dinner, has to get her kids to bed. If she really cares about something in politics, she maybe has 5 minutes. And so with 1,000 more, you can go and spend 5 very valuable minutes and be very powerful. You can read about a couple bills. You could take action on a couple bills. You know, it does everything beyond elections. There are a lot of people who are doing get out the vote efforts, and I don't want to duplicate their efforts. I wanted to build onto that, and there was no central place where you could take all the actions and stay engaged and have this level of transparency.
And there's this level of empowerment too, right, that comes along with it. I think that the people become empowered by having access to information. We so many times talk about you know, sitting behind this desk, we talk to people and they say, I didn't know this was happening. I find out about this too late, or by the time the ball is already down the court, right?
Yeah.
Now that you can't get it back. Now you don't have the access to the information. So for you, on the front side, you're actually giving people the opportunity to say, listen, you know what? Before this ever even becomes across the finish line, take a look.
Exactly. And we only put bills that make it out of committee because there's so many bills that get caught up in committee, and it would be a waste of people's time. They'd be spinning their wheels on most of these bills. But bills that make it out of committee, they really have a chance of passing, and those are the bills that we put into 1,000 more. So truly, we have a weekly newsletter that goes out every Friday. It is a 5-minute read. We cover 4 pieces of legislation that could actually potentially pass, so that we're giving people the opportunity to intervene if they want to and tell their elected officials what they want them to do about it. And again, we're nonpartisan, so read a little bit about it, and whether you're for or against it, we give you a script.
Right, and I want to emphasize nonpartisan, right? Because so you have the opportunity to get both sides and you hear from both sides. And so for you, what's that filter like? You know, when you're hearing from both sides, trying to navigate, what's that like?
So what's important to note is there's really more than 2 sides. Most people, I mean, politically speaking, we only have 2 major parties in this country, but people are much more nuanced than that. Like a Louisiana Democrat's not the same thing as a California Democrat.
Right.
So the reason why we have to be nonpartisan is because I would never want to box out anybody. I think that, you know, there are people out there who agree with one party on certain legislation, another party on another piece of legislation. And what's important is that their elected official has the opportunity to really understand that nuance in their own constituency so that they can vote in that way rather than voting with their party all of the time. They want to vote with their constituency because it's their constituency that gives them their job, that keeps them in that job. And so, you know, this really just creates a tool to do that in a way that no one's done before.
Right. So for you, bridging this gap, you know, having the excellence, now you're a 2022 Global Fellow, right? Talk to me about that and what that really means.
I mean, it means everything. I've also demoed this in other countries and other democracies. This is something that we could replicate in other democracies. And I get those sorts of opportunities because of organizations like Echoing Green. But what's the most important to me is that, you know, I built this app. I saw this app in a dream and I built it. but that means nothing if people don't use it. And so right now I'm in this pivotal moment where we just need to tell more people about this. Every single time I hear people say, I don't know what's going on, or I feel like there's nothing we can do, I feel like there's no transparency, or I feel like everything is so partisan. 1,000 more solves for all of that. And I just want to tell people there is hope. And if they get on this app and they stay informed and they continue to stay connected to their elected officials, and we make that as easy as possible, because I know it's a whole nother job and not everyone can dedicate their lives to working in politics like I did. And so, I want them to understand, though, that if we adopt this model, this is a new model of democracy. This is really going to revolutionize the way this democracy works. And so any opportunity I have to tell people to get on and to share it with friends is super important to me.
And I think for a certain segment of people, there is this breakdown, if you will, of making it just plain, accessible, right? And making you want to be a part.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people who feel disconnected, disenfranchised, right? And for yourself, who's had a political career in terms of the work that you've done in politics, talk to us about, just that choice of why you decided politics.
Yeah, so I always wanted to work in civic engagement, even though I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
So growing up, we were on food stamps at times, lived in Section 8 housing at times, and there are certain laws that govern food stamps. I don't know if people know this. So when I was in college at LSU, they passed a law that we couldn't buy crawfish with food stamps.
No.
And we used to be able to do that. And so, it's moments like that. And when I was little, there was a time when they tried to say you couldn't buy junk food with food stamps, so you couldn't get Oreos. And I was like, I want Oreos. And the way to get that is obviously for me to be the president and change this law. But as I got a little bit older, when I was a teenager, I was like, no, I want to deliver political news to people in a way, people from my community. I wanted it to come on BET right after 106 in Park. I was like, if I could just spend 5 minutes telling people what bills are coming up for a vote that's gonna really impact us, I can do it in a way that will get them engaged and get them active. And so I knew that I wanted to just work in the space of getting people information and influencing them to take action or empowering them to take action. And then as I did the work, I realized it's really not that easy. There weren't great places for people to get transparent news in a way without all of the fluff, just straight up, what is the bill about? Give it to me in a paragraph, no jargon, no legal language, just give it to me straight. And there was no real easy tool to take action on this stuff. Especially that crowdfunding piece, which I do think is really important, whether people want to use it or not, because it's not just about the money, and this is free to constituents, and it always will be. So, I ended up building this tool because I wanted to do civic engagement specifically, and I always knew I wanted to do that because I just understand that politics impacts our lives, and people from where I'm from don't always make that connection.
Right. Well, DeShante, we got to leave it here. And I want people to know you can get connected. 1000more.org, that's the website, right?
Yep.
What else do you want them to know?
Well, first 100, because people do get confused with that. So yeah, the numbers. But I just want people to know that, there is hope. And though it takes some time, we can start now. And there's so much energy that truly I know that if you start to get engaged and you tell your friends, you tell your family that we will see this country turning toward actually answering to the people, because I understand that right now it doesn't.
It doesn't. All right, DeShante Parks, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Listen, we're taking a quick break, and guess what? We'll be back with more right after this.
Check your pulse and turn off your phone. Get ready to be entertained. The Bronx Education is back, and we've got more youth voices, educational partnerships, exciting global discoveries with Alexi Gingertopoulos, dollar store science experiments with Dr. Whitey Black, and tons of ways for you to engage with us as we bring laughter and knowledge right to your doorstep. Me and the crew welcome you to Season 3 of the Bronx Education. The new season of the Bronx Education is here. Every Monday at 4:30 p.m. on Channel 67 Optimum, 2133 Fios.
19.7% of Bronxites currently experience food insecurity. Meanwhile, instead of these nice, colorful foods, this is the best food that they have access to. If this sounds like you, there are a bunch of resources to get healthy food for free or cheap. If you want to help, you might consider donating or volunteering in one of these places. Community fridges like this one are all over the city and allow New Yorkers to conveniently donate extra food to people who might need it. Go to this link and find your nearest one. Food banks and pop-up events like these provide millions of healthy meals to families in need. These organizations are distributing meals to Bronxites as we speak and are always accepting donations and volunteers.
Thank you, BronxNet. Congratulations on 30 years. What an amazing accomplishment. On behalf of myself, Ilona Dow, and I represent the Dow Twins and the Dow Twins Show, who are young producers. They started, I think, when they were 11, and now they're 14. They started making 30-second little fun facts, and now they are doing 30-minute shows. And it goes to a testament of how much you guys do in the Bronx to make young people want to continue to be involved. I wish you 30 more amazing years and beyond. Thank you for what you do.
And welcome back. The Bronx Defenders isn't your typical not-for-profit public defender. It's a catalyst for change, reshaping how people interact with the justice system. With a focus on tackling systemic problems, they lead efforts ranging from bail reform to addressing unconstitutional practices. Here now, the legal director for the criminal defense practice at the Bronx Defenders, Ilona Coleman. And Ilona, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Daren. I really appreciate it. I look forward to talking with you.
I'll look forward to the conversation. And let's make our viewers a little bit more acquainted. So when we talk about the work that you're doing, what kind of cases are you handling?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the legal director for the criminal defense practice. And in that role, I handle a variety of cases, really with, we have a holistic bent at the Bronx Defenders. So I handle individual cases, anything from misdemeanors to homicide cases. And then I also train everyone, make sure they're updated on the law. I handle all of the appeals at the Bronx Defenders. And then I also draft and participate in any amicus briefing. So I have a variety of responsibilities at the Bronx Defenders in addition to my own client work.
You use the word amicus briefing. I'm a little familiar, but make our viewers more familiar. What's an amicus briefing?
Absolutely. So amicus means friend of the court. And that means that sometimes we won't have an individual who has been directly impacted by something that's happened in a court case, but we may have other clients who could be impacted by something that's going to happen in a court case. And so sometimes we will reach out to the court really as a friend of the court and offer our opinion about the legal issue and how that could impact some of our clients down the road if the law were to go one way or the other. So we, again, our clients aren't directly impacted by the issue. They're not a defendant or a plaintiff in the lawsuit, but we're essentially providing some guidance to the court on how this could impact our clients. And so we've filed many, many amicus briefs, sometimes even up to the U.S. Supreme Court, in addition to the local appellate courts here in New York State.
Ilona, you talked a little bit about the work that you do with appeals. How prevalent are we seeing appeals in courts today?
So very prevalent. That's a great question. We handle, in our office, we handle any appeal where the government's actually taking the appeal and it impacts one of our clients. So we handle at least 4 appeals a year. And those are just for cases where the government's taking an appeal and it directly impacts our clients or something that has happened either at the appellate level, and then that's going to go up to the Court of Appeals. So we do handle many, many appeals. So in addition to the trial level work that I handle, I also handle appellate level work.
What do you think about way of the court system? We were having this conversation a couple of times on this platform, really dealing with where we are as far as court, court calendars, knowing coming out of COVID, the challenges that were out there, are things still pretty jammed up?
They are. And, I know that when we had this, the pandemic, right, there were these systems that were put into place, like virtual court appearances. And that happened in criminal court and supreme criminal here in the Bronx. And, the thinking about it at first, we weren't really sure. The lawyers weren't sure if this was best for the client. Of course, we wanted to keep the client safe. We wanted to keep ourselves safe. And so virtual appearances were allowing that to happen. But one of the concerns that we had as a public defender that I had in particular with virtual appearances was really that I was worried that the judge wouldn't see our client, for everything that they are, right? The whole person. That, what was really going to happen was that the judge was going to see our client through a screen and be making decisions about, their liberty, whether or not they were going to be incarcerated, on bail at Rikers Island. And so I think there was a real concern about that. What I will say now that we've sort of seen how this has played out is that I think using virtual appearances is extremely handy. It allows for things to move quicker in court. What you'll see in criminal court, at least, and sometimes in Supreme, but for a large part in criminal court, we have a lot of court congestion. We have a lot of cases. Things have sort of come back almost to pre-pandemic levels, where people are unfortunately sitting around in court all day waiting for their case to be called. And I think virtual appearances could actually relieve a lot of that. And you know what? The court system has the technology to do it.
Yeah. In talking to people about taking the virtual route, what kind of response are you getting from your clients when we talk about possibly going the virtual route?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I mean, you know that I represent poor people, right? And not everyone has, if you're poor, you don't necessarily have access to wireless, right? You don't have access to a cell phone. So sometimes that can be problematic. And certainly when we were in the virtual appearance world back during COVID times, the height of COVID, I had clients who found it difficult to actually log on or to get the software they needed to be able to access the appearance. But I will say that for a majority of my clients, they found virtual appearances to be quite helpful, right? I would have clients who could go to work, they would call in for their virtual appearance. The appearance would last, 15, 20 minutes at most, and then they could get back to their lives, right? Because a majority of the calendar calls, or majority of the cases, excuse me, that are being heard in criminal court are really calendar calls, right? Where they're very, very quick appearances, determining whether or not the prosecution has provided discovery to defense. Defense and prosecution have filed motions on the cases. So not much is really of substance really happening. And virtual appearances, I think, really allowed many of my clients to, sort of move through their lives without much disruption. So I'm really in favor where we can do it, and people have the ability to get onto Wi-Fi to actually have virtual appearances.
Ilona, you spoke a little bit about the clients that you serve, predominantly coming out of poor and economically challenged neighborhoods. As you look at the criminal justice system right now, and we know that it has not strongly favored poor and particularly people of color, what are we seeing by way of improvement that you can say, hey, I'm looking here and I'm saying things have changed for the better here?
Yeah, no, I think it's a work in progress, right? I mean, I think that we have seen some real reforms which have been extremely beneficial to my clients, including bail and discovery reforms. So in 2020, the legislature implemented these sweeping reforms to both bail and discovery. And so now, with respect to bail, less of my clients are being held in on bail, where they've, accused of committing very low level type crimes. And so I think that has been extremely beneficial. And discovery reform has also been beneficial because we're now getting, as a defense attorney, I'm now getting the information sooner and quicker. I can talk with my client about what the evidence is, and we can make a determination how to actually handle the case much quicker than I was able to pre discovery reform. So, those types of reforms have been extremely beneficial to my client. But again, this is a work in progress. The criminal justice system is not perfect. As we all recognize, there are some real problems, and I think some of the changes are certainly helping that, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah, certainly not to put you on the spot. I mean, I think it speaks for itself. So, but to see, where we are today, and obviously in 2024, knowing that there's a huge calendar, a lot of things to contend with. But let me back up for a moment and just go here and talk a little bit about the work that's being done, because a lot of work that you're doing is somewhat groundbreaking in some ways, and in other ways, it's really making a difference in the lives of your clients. So share with me a little bit about that community impact that you guys have been able to bring about.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for asking that question, because something that I've recently been working on, and I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing. Concerns this mass surveillance lawsuit that we filed actually last month in April. And so let me give you a little bit of background, which is that, and this lawsuit was filed against the Department of Corrections. So the Department of Correction records and monitors nearly every call made by people in custody. And they do this through their contract with a for profit private firm called Securus Technologies. And the system monitors and records everything, right? And they don't only record and collect the substance of those calls, but they're collecting the personal and biometric information of incarcerated New Yorkers, primarily many of whom are Black and Brown New Yorkers, because they're housed at Rikers Island while they're awaiting trial. And it's also surveilling community members, loved ones, friends, clergy, anyone who calls or speaks with an incarcerated person in a DOC facility. And in reality, what this is that DOC, through Securus, is operating a mass community surveillance project. And the universal recording subjects, incarcerated people and their loved ones to increased government monitoring, data collection, and scrutiny in violation of constitutional and privacy rights under both the federal and state laws. And so last month, our office, along with the Brooklyn Defender Services, New York County Defender Services, and Cleary Gottlieb, filed a class action on behalf of individuals who are both incarcerated and community members. And we brought that action here in Bronx County in Supreme Court against the New York City Department of Correction over this mass surveillance, really, and mass incarceration of New Yorkers. So, we're very excited about that lawsuit. And at this point, the Department of Correction will have to respond to that suit, and we will go through the civil discovery process.
It took a while to get there, but are you optimistic that you'll be able to see this all the way through?
I am optimistic that there's going to be a change. I'm certainly optimistic that the Department of Correction is going to have to do something. I think the city is going to have to do something, in particular with respect to our contract with Securus Technologies. I will just note that Securus Technologies has been sued throughout the country for their violations of privacy and mass surveillance of people. And so I think there's going to be a real reckoning with respect to our contract with this this private firm, Securus Technologies.
Yeah, a lot to pay attention to. Certainly, we'll continue to, we'll continue to follow that. Anything else in terms of legislation and things that we should be paying attention to out of your office and work that you're doing?
Well, there is some legislation that is coming about. Unfortunately, I'm not the person to sort of talk about it. It does relate to this mass surveillance. So you should sort of stay tuned. I'm hoping that folks will certainly follow us on social media, follow us, on our website, and get more information about our litigation efforts. In addition to this new legislation that should be coming out in the next couple weeks.
For somebody who's out there right now and saying, listen, I may need a criminal defense attorney, there's probably some quick tips that you could give them in terms of advice and things to do right away. What would those things be?
Sorry, Daren, you just cut out for a very short time, so
Sure.
I only heard.
Sure,
Very beginning.
I'll repeat again. I said, well, there may be somebody out there that's watching, right, saying, listen, I do need a criminal defense attorney. And I said, what kind of tips would you give them right off the start to get themselves on the right path to getting a proper defense?
Sure. I think my recommendation is that whenever an individual is approached by law enforcement or they think law enforcement is looking for them, they should absolutely call our office. And, or call me. My information is certainly available on our website, because I think getting out in front of sort of the case is really important, right? Having a conversation with that person to understand why law enforcement might want to speak to them, whether or not they're a suspect or a witness in a case. And so we're always happy to engage with anyone who reaches out to our office. We can get them an attorney, assigned to them, and we can talk with them about how to best protect themselves if they think that they are going to be prosecuted.
Yeah. So if people want more information, what do they do?
So they can reach out to our front desk, our receptionist. They can talk to our early defense team. It's really just about making a phone call to our office, or sending an email to me as the legal director. They can certainly reach out that way, and I can put them on the right path. That's certainly not a problem, and I love to do it.
Well, Ilona Coleman, thank you so much for being with us. She is the legal director for the criminal defense practice at the Bronx Defenders. Been great talking to you. Got to have you back.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Daren. Take care.
All righty. Taking a quick break, and guess what? We'll be with more right after this.
Hey, creative family, my name is Timothy Coleman, and I'm the Director of Education here at BronxNet. And I'm standing in BronxNet's Media and Technology Studios in the South Bronx, because I want to let you know about an amazing program that we're bringing back that highlights the creativity of community members just like you. Emerging Media Makers is a show that introduces you to BronxNet's certified producers. They've taken a step in their creative journey by enrolling in BronxNet's media training classes. On this show, you'll get to see the many ways that our certified producers have created a space that's all their own. Emerging Media Makers, your passion lives here.
And we are back. Recently, the Federal Trade Commission issued a ban on non-compete agreements. The rule aims to empower employees by restricting employers from enforcing new non-compete agreements, except for senior executives. Now, joining me now to share a little bit more is the founding partner of the Boyd Law Group, Patrick J. Boyd. And as always, Patrick, good to have you with us.
Great to see you again.
So let's break this down. First of all, for somebody that may not be so familiar, when we talk about a non-compete agreement, what are we looking at?
Sure. It's an agreement that the employer will ask an employee to sign, usually when they start, but sometimes even after they've been at the job for a while. And it prohibits those employees from leaving the job and going to, a competitor. Everything from leaving IBM maybe and going to Microsoft, or even as much as leaving Burger King and going to McDonald's or something like that. And the way they're written is quite oppressive in the sense that if you read them as an employee, you might say, geez, I don't know if I can go to another job. I could get sued if I try to go to another job. And in acknowledging that risk and acknowledging the impact on free movement of labor, President Biden passed an executive order quite some time ago, and then the FTC just followed through with it in April, making these non-competes, at least by virtue of its order, unenforceable within 120 days of April, so come to the close of the summer.
Right. So with this non-compete clause, obviously a lot of unhappy people, but let's talk about how this is actually going to play out.
Yeah, well, so it's a great point. I think the order was issued by the FTC in April, and just days later, a grouping of chambers of commerce in Texas filed a lawsuit challenging the authority of the Federal Trade Commission to make the ruling that they made. So it was going to take 120 days to go into effect, and now we've got to have a whole litigation about whether or not it's going to go into effect. The ramifications are still, as a result, quite complicated to figure out. Figuring out what a court's going to do is strange and challenging, particularly with this kind of unique thing. The one thing that we've talked about before on this show, and I would point out, is that some states have already started to limit the enforceability of non-competes, irrespective of a federal trend or a federal piece of legislation to that effect. So I think workers can count on added freedom. This federal mandate may go into effect with some whole or limited impact, but no matter how you slice the bread, there will be more freedom for more workers to leave one job and go to another. We just don't know the extent of that freedom quite yet.
Yeah. And so when we talk about employee mobility, I want to talk about that for a few moments, the potential impact on that. We talked a little bit about it, but let's really unpack this here because, if you work a job, you want to be able to go from place to place. And I think that that's really what employees are saying. Listen, I don't want to have to deal with this. And yet
Right.
still this law really in some way, shape or form helps in that manner.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. And what you're saying is consistent with the wording that both the FTC and our President Biden put in place when making these efforts. They figure that workers' wages will go up about $500 to $1,000 per year per worker if this law is adopted. They figured that another 8,500 new businesses will be formed if this freedom to move is allowed, and they figure there'll be another somewhere between 17,000 and 29,000 patents a year. New businesses, new ideas, new opportunities, all just by giving these workers more freedom to take a better job without having to worry about being sued for doing so. So a lot of great things that would happen to the economy, at least are seen happening to the economy, to the extent that this law is implemented.
Do you know how they base those statistics? I mean, I'm kind of concerned. I'm not concerned, interested in how they get these numbers.
I certainly don't. I think part of it is looking at comparators between some of the states that on their own have allowed for freedom of workers, that is, that have prohibited non-competes, like California, for example. I think they also take a look at just sort of patent applications and whether or not people maybe choose to use different jurisdictions for filing patents to avoid the non-compete restrictions. And of course, part of it is also a fair amount of speculation. Yeah. What I can tell you anecdotally, but I think importantly, is that a lot of workers call us every single week. I would say I get somewhere between 5 and 15 calls from workers saying, hey, I've got a job. I think I've got a better job lined up. I think I have that opportunity, but I have a non-compete. What should I do? So there's lots of workers wanting to make the job move, having to spend money on talking to a lawyer about the job move, or being hesitant to make the job move, all because of these non-competes as the law is currently in place. And hopefully that worry will disappear. They'll be able to say, look, I've worked hard, I interviewed well, I've got a better job, I can just make that job transition by virtue of some of these changes in law, which is a very practical impact for a lot of people.
Yeah. Let's move on to another subject, one that's a little bit closer and near and dear to my heart. Talk about that of college athletes. And now college athletes looking at the perspective of becoming a union, specifically to deal with the NIL and the things that they've got going on. Where do we stand here?
Yeah, it's a fascinating development, and near and dear to my heart too, because the ruling came from a small college up in New Hampshire called Dartmouth, which is where I was lucky enough to go to school. So February 5th, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that the Dartmouth men's basketball team could have a vote to try to unionize, and the players did vote, and by a vote of 13-2, they did elect to have a union representing them. This is something that was contemplated back in 2015 with Northwestern University, but at that point in time, the board didn't rule on it. It had to do with football as opposed to basketball. So right now, the argument is that these athletes are serving the College of Dartmouth. They're providing for revenue for the sports. They're providing for ticket sales and endorsements and all kinds of things. By virtue of that, they're like employees of Dartmouth College, and they should have rights like employees to form a union. Now, just like the ruling or the order rather on the non-compete, this ruling has been challenged by Dartmouth College, so it's going to be adjudicated and argued about for quite some time. But as we sit here today, there is a decent chance that there will be the rights of college athletes to collectively argue for better benefits, certain practice times, certain payments, and those kind of things, and more say in the life that they live as college athletes, not just as revenue generators for the college, but also as revenue generators for their own good and their own well-being.
Yeah. I want to unpack a little bit more the pros and cons of this here, right? Because there are a lot of people saying, listen, college athletes deserve to be paid. They make the institution a lot of money. You talk about you get a scholarship, but the scholarship does not pale in comparison to the dollars that are actually being made by these institutions and universities. But then on the other side, you have those who say, listen, we've done enough. We've got it. It's enough. We've satisfied. They get a scholarship. There's some pros and cons here. But from you, on a legal side, how do you see the pros and cons?
It's complicated, and the law is always informed by the smart policymakers and people like yourself looking at the business and the lives of the athletes, right? I think the challenge is going to be that there is, on the one hand, an argument that the athletes are contributing some dollars in value to the school. But just to take Dartmouth as an example, right? It's a relatively small school with a relatively small impact on revenue generation for the school. And I think that's going to weigh in some ways in favor of the school saying, look, we give a lot to these athletes and they don't bring a lot of dollars to us. There are other schools that are quite frankly very different, right? With athletes, college athletes that are generating a ton of revenue for the schools that they play for, and who argue as a result that they should have more of the benefit of the wealth that they help to create. I think, and you know, I think your insight would be valuable on this, and I've talked to a lot of other former college athletes, but I think that the real challenge is finding some balance between giving some reward to the athletes who obviously make a bigger commitment in their college lives than just a person committing to be a student, right? And who take a risk in doing so, because if they get hurt, they may never play again. And they're playing for the school, not getting paid for it. and risking injury. So I do think there's some value that should be offered to them for it. On the other hand, and I'm sure you've seen this argument too, there's a group of people, including fans, right, who think that there's a lot of appeal to amateur competition. And if you want to play as a pro and get paid as a pro, then go play as a pro and get paid as a pro. And otherwise, enjoy your college experience, but there are downsides to that college experience, including not being paid as much. I mean, the interesting thing that you mentioned, which we're not really talking about too much here, but certainly the two play against one another, is there's also this name, image, and recognition, name, image, and likeness law, the NIL law, which allows athletes to benefit a different way from their sports and their success. And we don't even understand the ramifications of that yet, but that's another way that these athletes who study hard and who compete also athletically can find some way to benefit extra from the extra effort that they make and the extra value that they deliver to the institutions that they attend.
Yeah, if my name's on the back of your school jersey and it just happens to be doing very well, I have a hard time with everybody else but me getting something out of the deal. So I would definitely be calling you and saying I need a lawyer or somebody to have a conversation about this, because we look at name, image, and likeness and the profits and those who have profited, and you turn on the other side, you see these young men and women, and they would go home with nothing at many times up until this, and we had something had to be done.
And get in trouble for as much as taking a sandwich that somebody might think of as being, appropriate, or one suit jacket that's misunderstood somewhere.
Right.
So definitely the balance of power, to my view of the situation, is off, right? Whether or not that balance of power is remedied by virtue of the NIL work or the collective rights of the student athletes to organize, or both, I don't know. But it's an important fight to be had for a better balance of fairness. And so I look forward to paying attention to it and talk to you about it as time goes on.
Yeah, I only have a couple minutes left, but I do want to shoot across this topic right here: how public protesting affects an employee's retainment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's an important thing, and as we talk to the younger generation of employees out there, there's lots and lots of them, to their credit, who choose to work for an employer not just because of the pay and benefits of that employer, but also because of the political stances that employer might take, and because of the things that employer might do on a world stage or even a state and local stage. So there's been a fair amount of questions we've gotten from clients who say, I work at XYZ, I work at Starbucks, I work at Google, I work at Microsoft, and I'm not happy with what they're doing politically in this place or that place. And, do I have a right to protest, and what happens if I do? And, the law is unfortunately mostly unclear, but to the extent that it is clear, it mostly operates to the detriment of employees. On the one hand, if you're an employee and you're acting, for example, in New York, not on your work day and on the weekend and in your own private time, and just taking some kind of political activity, you probably should be free to do so. But to the extent that the employer sees you as engaging in some kind of protest that has any detriment on their business, or that is protesting their activities, for the most part, the law says the employer is free to let that employee go. That's a controversial issue, I'm afraid, and people like to believe that they should be able to say exactly what they want once they're gone from work, and it shouldn't have any impact on their work. But the law right now doesn't completely recognize that freedom, and I think that's an important thing that's going to be part of the debates in the future.
So how do we deal with that whole issue? First Amendment rights, employer policy. It's a fine line. I get it. But what can we expect to come down the pike?
Well, the First Amendment rights are a little bit more clearly delineated and better, and that's with respect to the public sector employers, right? So you do have a First Amendment right to express your sentiments when you're working for a government entity and have some kind of protection. In the private sector, though, as we see all the time, and which I think you're alluding to, that freedom is far more limited. And I don't know that that's going to change anytime soon. I just think that it's going to be re-examined and needs to be re-examined because people are starting to think of their jobs as not just ways that they earn a living, but also statements as to their politics and their identities, if you will, which makes sense considering how much time we all spend at our respective jobs. The one other thing I just want to mention in passing, because we got a lot of calls on this too, there's a fair amount of activism, as you know, on the student campuses these days. And we are getting calls from people saying, well, if I'm a student at Columbia, if I'm a student at XYZ, and I'm engaged in a protest, how is this going to impact me? And the one thing I say, and I don't love to say it, but it is true, at this point in time, if you're protesting and somebody's got a snapshot of it on Facebook or whatever, right, that may be something that follows you with your job applications or your future. I don't know that it should. I don't know that it's fair that it does, but it is something that has ramifications, especially with the social media these days where you can capture pictures of people doing anything. And I think it's making the workplace complicated. It's blurring the lines between what we do in our own private time and what our employers know about us doing and what our employers might choose to do to act upon things that, frankly, might not be their business, but they still learn about.
Yeah.
So it's a brave new world.
Yeah, January 6th, I was right there in right next to Washington, D.C., stayed in a hotel, rode up on 95 coming back this way, and saw many cars that were really engaging in protest and a couple of other things. But the long story short was that even though they weren't the ones who stormed the Capitol, many people who were actually in cars and showing up in protest form had to answer to employers simply because their picture was associated with the January 6th insurrection attack. And so there's a lot to be said for how your personal impacts your professional, and it's something that's going to be debated, and we'll definitely need some courts to hash this one out for some time to come. Yeah. So.
It's an interesting time. There's just so many more. I mean, I think the great news is that people are active in thinking about their jobs and their lives and active in politics. I mean, but I think the alarming part is that the go home and live your own life concept just doesn't exist the same way in this world of social media. And that's something that's not going to change. We can't put the genie back in the bottle there. So there's a lot of law that needs to be contemplated along those lines.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. And Patrick Boyd, my friend, it's always great having you on because we have some good conversation, good dialogue, and some great explanations. So got to have you back soon. So thanks for joining us.
Great to see you.
All right, Patrick Boyd of the Boyd Law Group. Listen, I want to let you know now we come to the end of our show. Hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice and Anti-Violence Forum. Now, if you're rewatching this week's edition, catch Free Cablecast right here at BronxNet.org. If you want to join the conversation, present your own point of view, visit our social media at BronxNet TV, and join us next week. We continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, saying take care. God bless.